perimeters and zero trust is not just a hot security topic, but it's a necessary change to the way we look at security. And so instead of thinking about IPs and protecting IPs, we need to start thinking about protecting workloads and people and networks, data and devices. So with that, I'm going to see if I can get to my next slide. And what I want to do is give you a quick introduction to the topic. Jack Koons is going to speak from Unisys, and who's the chief security strategist there, and he's going to give you the meat of what we're going to talk about today. Should be very exciting. Let's see. Hopefully, you can see my second slide. This is just a quick overview of what we do. For anybody who doesn't know, eSecurity Solutions, we're a security solution provider. We work with small, mid-size, and enterprise-level companies. We're B2B only. We focus only on security, trying to provide our customers with managed security, risk assessments, compliance-level risk assessments, CISO services, security products. We resell products on the top of that. So basically, we provide products and services that help our customers through the security process, starting with risk assessments, helping define your security strategies and policies, helping you prevent threats, monitor, detect, and respond, and ultimately all the other areas of security, which include managing, adjusting, and compliance. So those are all necessary parts of security. We want to be there for our customers in all those areas. With regards to secure perimeters, this is basically, we no longer live in the world that we used to, right? I mean, the old world, everyone worked from the office. Everything was defined. The firewall was designed to be an external perimeter that basically separated you from the evil outside world, which wasn't generally what you were part of, but against the inside world. And the inside world were all your employees. And occasionally you'd have a remote worker on a laptop, or you'd have an office, but even the office's traffic could be funneled through your home office. So companies today have to protect against all of these threats, right? There's private and public cloud, applications in the cloud, of which almost all apps now are moving into the cloud, especially for smaller businesses. But I think even for mid-size and larger companies, your applications, your Salesforce and your sales and marketing and your engineering and your accounting apps are all into the cloud now. And to think that doesn't change our environment and what we have to protect and how we have to do it wouldn't make any sense. Of course, we have remote offices, and now we have work from home, which is going to change and come back to the office at some level. But right now, it's maybe 90% working from home. So we've now just emphasized and taken all of the things that make it hard to provide security, and we've made it worse. So the old model was pretty simple, right? I mean, you have a firewall, you have endpoint protection, you protect the data on your servers, you provide access control, and those are that's the meat and potatoes of what we used to have to do to provide security. Much more straightforward. And the analogy to that was when we used to have mainframes, and then we went to computers, PCs. The world changed completely, and the model for protecting the data in those days was different. The model for communicating and for enabling our employees has changed. So everything is moving forward, and if we don't change our security with that, it's going to cause issues. So today's security requires software-defined perimeters, not hardware perimeters. The software-defined perimeter, the goals are to extend security, protect, and provide a secure perimeter that includes decentralized IT assets that have now moved outside the corporate infrastructure into the cloud. And it's really kind of all about the cloud, but the cloud, broadly speaking. And we need to be able to provide an on-demand, dynamically provisioned, air-gapped network. And the segmentation on the network resources has to mirror what we used to do with physically defined networks, but now operate in software. So we have to have a software enabled perimeter that is flexible and malleable and scalable, that moves where the data moves, where the IT assets move, and where the users move. And we have to, and it's very user driven. So the three basic pillars of software defined perimeters are that it's identity centric, not IP address centric. So it's got to follow the IT assets, the users first and foremost, and with the least privilege model. It's built for the cloud. So it's designed around the fact that the cloud was changing the world we live in and what we have to protect. And it's a zero trust environment, right? It has to start with defaulting to deny access and then enabling it when appropriate. That's the only way to really provide strong security. So given that as an intro, I want to move to enable Jack here to take over. And here we go. So you should be able to see Jack. There we go. Over to you, Jack. Oh, I can't hear you.
First, yep. So first off, Tom, since we're doing the seamless transition, I want to make sure that audio and video is good on my end, and I can hear you perfectly. How about me? Can you see and hear me good?
I can see you, but I'm also seeing your screen. Okay, now that looks better.
Great. So now we're going to go in. So put your seatbelts on. So Tom has told me to basically shut everything else down and just put my ugly mug up here on the screen for you guys. So this is what you're looking at. So apologies up front for what you have to look at. In lieu of PowerPoint slides, you're going to look at Jack's face for the next 30 minutes. So first off, eSecurity, Tom and the gang, appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of dial in here today and kind of walk you through this. So that being said, if you listen to what Tom just said, there is a lot to unpack there. We have about 30 minutes. So what I'm going to try and do is tease out, articulate, unpack, if you will, and really get to the crux of the problem, right? Why are we here? Why is this important to you? That's what we're going to try and do. Like I said, we got about 30 minutes to do it. So the way this is going to flow is I'm going to talk to you about the operational landscape today, what's going on, why the threat landscape has changed in accordance with the operational landscape. And then we're going to talk about some capabilities and some strategies and basically a different way of thinking about the way you would present the network defense, if you will, the presentation and array of the current architecture schema vis-a-vis current strategies that folks are looking at from a security standpoint. I'm going to show you a video at the end, about 2 to 3 minutes long, that's going to kind of give you a visual of what that would look like in action. So that being said, it's important for you to take away one thing from this, which is I'm not talking about something, to be or aspirational goals. I'm going to be showing you something that actually exists today in the wild, something that clients and customers can actually use and actually should be using. And I'm going to tell you why they're not and how they can start that journey. So that being said, put your seatbelts on. Let's kind of jump into this. So, everyone knows the current pandemic, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, work from home, remote workforce, it's happening. But I'm going to tell you that, we have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Everybody's been talking about it, governments, businesses, public, commercial, private sector, everyone's been talking about enabling the remote worker, or what I like to refer to as extending the operational reach and access of the end user device application client, right? Now, bear in mind, up front, I need you to understand why I look at this problem and this opportunity, if you will, the way I do. And I do it because my role at Unisys, as Tom said, is Chief Cybersecurity Strategist. It's a global role, so I will be on the phone with you guys today, or video, and then later this afternoon, I'm in our APAC region, and then in EMEA tomorrow morning, right? So global depth and breadth. But that it also allows me to see a lot of stuff going on across all the regions. So for example, in Australia right now, remote work, COVID-19 is happening in Australia, but they're also getting absolutely pummeled by the Chinese because of some political decisions that were made, some comments that were made by the Australian government about COVID-19. China didn't like it, and now Australia is dealing with an entire nation state threat environment on net against them, right? So you can imagine the challenges to enabling a remote workforce in that kind of environment. Here in the United States, no shortage of what's going on when we talk about ransomware, right? And of course, most people talk about ransomware, they are singularly focused myopically, almost myopically on that weapon, right? The weapon, the payload, if you will, right? The locking up, if you will, of the network assets. That's not what's important to me. What's really important to me is the actual delivery mechanism, the first part of that conversation. And we're going to talk about ways to frustrate that, because if we can frustrate that and we can figure out ways to prevent that from moving around in your network, or actually better yet, even identifying your network as a potential target, you don't have to worry about the weaponized payload, right? We've stopped it before. As they say in the cyber kill chain, most people talk phase 1 through phase 7 of the cyber kill chain. We're going to talk about ways to help you prevent it at phase 0 before it even transitions into phase 1, right? So the thing that I've noticed though globally is that there are some common themes, right, across all regions, right, that make what I'm going to talk to you about today particularly applicable. Now, I've been with Unisys for 4 years. Prior to that, I spent 25 years in the DoD. My job is what they refer to as a cyber warfare officer. That's what we call it today. But back then, before there was such a thing, it was just exploitation. My job, my team's job, was to find an adversary network anywhere in the world and figure out a way, virtually or physically, to exploit that network for either effects delivery, for data removal, data exfiltration, or just simply to listen, right? So it gives me a unique lens, whether it was working at the National Security Agency or Special Operations Command, or actually eventually helping stand up US Cyber Command and the Cyber Command umbrellas, if you will. It gives me a unique lens in a way that when people talk to me about security and use words like perimeter and access, those have certain meanings to me, right? So I tend to look at them a little bit differently. And now my role in Unisys is to prevent that from happening. So what's changed? Well, really nothing's changed, right? We've always had remote workers. We've always had mobile workers. We've always had people doing things outside of sanctuary, if you will, outside the traditional data center on premise, right? In my world, it was going in physically behind a gate, behind another gate, and then down underground. There was always some way to control access in and out, right? All that's really happened is Mother Nature has stepped in, literally bumped us and said, hey, knuckleheads, you thought you had about a decade to prepare your workforce for remote work? I need you doing it now, right? So Mother Nature has literally collapsed a decade of road mapping into about a week, right? So in the case of Unisys, what we did was we had about 5% of our 20,000 workforce, so 20,000 associates worldwide. About 5% of us worked remotely, habitually. The other 95% went into a physical facility to do their work, right? Within 1 week, we were able to transition seamlessly with no loss of production into 95% remote, with only 5% going into physical. Now, here's the kicker. We did that overnight without having to do anything for anybody else, by simply pushing out, just like you would on patches, some agents onto all the associate laptops and devices. And by the way, many of those, because you guys are all working in this now, this environment, many of those aren't corporate devices. They were simply told, go buy something from Best Buy, go buy a laptop, go buy an iPad, go buy a Surface, right? The point is, we were able to then push out, just like we would do with patching, push out a lightweight agent onto their box. And literally overnight, without the use of VPNs, we were able to securely enable and extend the operational reach of a remote workforce at a level of security commensurate with that the NSA CIO or the CIO for DNI or CIA would be able to put inside of their data center, because the level of the crypto chassis is that strong. And there's some other things we're going to talk about. But we were able to do that without skipping a heartbeat. In fact, we're probably never going back. In fact, the conversation inside Unisys right now is actually, let's get rid of a lot of our real estate. So while we may not be making as much money pre-COVID as we are, or today as we would be pre-COVID, because of just the limitations on being able to move around, right? We're actually able to get rid of a lot of things, infrastructure that we don't need, physical infrastructure. We're able to get, so there's a whole bunch of business conversations happening right now because we've used this as an opportunity, right? And so that's really the key here, is right. It's not about security for security's sake. It's about using security to enable and open up other business opportunities. Now, having said that, Tom mentioned a bunch of things. He used words like software-defined perimeters. He used things like cloud, right? VPNs and firewalls. So imagine this. What if I asked you, wouldn't it be great? Everyone right now, pretty much most of the world, bases their security strategy, their security buy, right, their risk prioritization and risk allocation and risk resourcing on a couple of things. But at its core, it's really predicated on an antiquated view of the way we look at a network. It's hardware based primarily, it's static, it's about having a CIO or CISO or a CSO trying to control the infrastructure. And guess what, folks? They fail to do that. They just can't do that, right? For many reasons. This is why ransomware is all over the place. I'll give you an example. VPN. VPN was designed, is nothing more than a tunnel between two endpoints, but it was designed to do one thing, allow access between point A and point B. We're now asking VPNs to do things they weren't designed to do, like scale. In order to do a VPN correctly, as a matter of fact, when I used to do my old job, VPNs were actually the first target we would look at. We would find out where you were doing RDP. We would find out where you're using VPNs, and we would compromise them, because once you compromise a VPN or RDP, you now have basically a sliding board into the infrastructure. And once you're inside that infrastructure, most people don't have the time or money or energy or actually visibility to actually protect what's inside their network. They're too busy worrying about the perimeter. Once you're inside, right? All that loose, uncontrolled TCP, UDP traffic, that's where the adversary hides, right? That's why dwell time is so long, right? So there has to be a better way. It's not VPNs. VPNs can't be the solution. They're a Band-Aid fix, right? In fact, most people don't tune the VPN correctly. They just turn on the wizard, or they set default settings and they put it across the entire enterprise that way. Now you have a single doorway into your organization. And so when NSA or NIST or the government says VPNs they need to be patched because they're vulnerable, no one can bring the VPN down to patch it, because it's the one doorway for the entire company now to stay alive, right? So if you were having problems patching before COVID, imagine trying to do COVID patching now, when the one thing, the VPN, is the single doorway, and if you bring it down to patch, it may never come back up again because the patch may fail, or your business dies when you bring it down. So these are all the kind of conversations. This is why VPNs don't work, right? Firewalls, completely different conversation, but very similar. Extremely complex, also vulnerable. Now you have to bring teams in just to manage the firewalls, and with a remote workforce, now you have people moving around all over the place in a dynamic fashion. Imagine trying to write all the exquisite access control lists, firewall rule sets, and everything you have to do just to enable the company to stay alive. I'm not even talking about security. I'm talking about just trying to keep the breath coming into the organization so it can stay alive, right? So now organizations are faced with a dynamic tension where the network people are simply scrambling to keep the business up and running and support a workforce that's all over the place that they can't see, control, or even know where they're at. At the same time, the security people are just dying on the vine because the ransomware attack threat vector is literally sitting there chomping at the bit, coming at them through VPNs, compromising RDP, and basically going nuts inside the wire, right? So when you say it out loud like that, it sounds like madness, right? Who would want that job? On top of that, there's no shortage of provider out there that says, just buy my tool, buy my capability, and we'll get you zero trust, we'll get you this, we'll get you that, right? So now endpoints are being hammered with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different types of solutions on every endpoint just to provide security. I mean, folks, this is untenable, and it is literally breaking down. This is why, at first it was Mueller-Maersk in Wired magazine, that now you're hearing about Garmin, the state of Texas. I mean, everyone is getting hit with ransomware because it's madness. There's got to be a better way. So what is that better way? It's about visibility, precision, and control, right? Boop. Let me see. Here we go. Visibility, precision, and control. So if we can do that, right, but do it without hardware. It has to be without hardware, because no one now in a remote workforce, which, by the way, most organizations aren't collapsing back, they're now going to figure out, like Unisys, ways to save money by keeping people at home. They don't have to have parking lots. They don't have to have buildings. It's a lot cheaper to keep people extended, and they can move around, right? But you can't do it with hardware, because hardware is too costly, it's too complex, and you can't control it. In fact, most CISOs, CIOs, they were failing just to do asset inventory on the stuff that they had in the building. How are you going to ask them to do that when stuff's at home and it's popping up all over the place? It's a silly conversation, and it needs to stop, right? So you have to do it in a way where you can have a software-based solution. It has to be identity-based, because as Tom said, if you're not identity-based, like Jack, the identity of Jack, I need to be able to log into anything I have access to when I have access to it on any transport mechanism so that I can do the work I need to do, right? It has to be based on my identity. It cannot no longer be based on a static IP routing table. It just doesn't work. The sheer complexity goes through the roof, right? Then you have to have a conversation around microsegmentation. Now, for those that aren't familiar with it, Google it. But the short story is there is segmentation, which most organizations fail to do. That's why they get hammered with ransomware, because they are flat networks and they don't do any kind of segmentation until after they've been attacked. I'm not talking about segmentation. Segmentation is done actually for network optimization and performance, not for security, but it has great security benefits. But it's really designed for optimization and performance uptick on a network, right? I'm talking about microsegmentation, which is designed best athlete from the ground up, explicitly designed for security. It's literally taking the concept of a hardened perimeter, but driving all of that down to where the data packet itself is responsible for its own security. And that's the key here, folks. As Tom said, the key is the data. No one hacks you, no one does ransomware on you, no one does anything to you because they're interested in that $300 laptop that your company bought from Best Buy. But that's how most people that's how most people base their security profiles. That's how most CISOs, that's most people base it on the stuff. It's not about the infrastructure. It is about the data. So the first thing you got to do is you got to start thinking differently, and you need to start thinking data centric, data first. It's about the data. I don't care about the infrastructure. It's about the data. My data is now got to be able to be in flight, go where it needs to go, when it needs to go to, and time to be relevant so that my company retains competitive advantage. That's the key. And so that being said, software-based, identity-based, encrypted, it's got to be encrypted, because if you've got data in flight, it's got to be encrypted, because you will lose control of it. That data will get in hands of people that it probably shouldn't. So if it's encrypted at such a level, then you don't have to worry about it, because if the data is encrypted and what someone gets a hold of is a piece of the segment or a piece of the packet that's encrypted, they're still stuck with something that's encrypted. They're not going to have the time to unpack it to be value add. Because think about it, if that was the case, then every company that got hit with ransomware and was locked up would simply unencrypt it and continue on. That's why encryption is such a powerful tool. Most organizations don't use it correctly, right? They're too busy trying to unpack the encryption for DPI because they can't control their own network, right? So identity-based, software-defined, encrypted microsegmentation. That's your 4 words, right? Whoop, there we go. That's your 4 words. That's your safe space. That's where you need to do. That's how your security needs to be done. Now, question is, how do you do that? That's a mouthful, right? So microsegmentation. All right, so Jack, you said that it's taking all of the traditional notions of security, a perimeter hardware-based security profile, and driving that down to a granular level. So every packet leaving my network, my application, or from user to user, user to device, whatever, every packet is now responsible for its own security. Well, that sounds crazy. How would we do that? Well, think about it. We've been doing this. Mother Nature has been doing this for millions of years. It's how the human body works. That's why when I get cold, the blood and air goes to my heart and lungs to protect that, and I will lose fingers to frostbite, because Mother Nature figured out it's not about the infrastructure. It's about the critical pieces, the brain and the heart, and the data, which is the air and the blood, right? Mother Nature's figured this out. The military has figured this out. We have ships. Think about World War II. Ships sat in the United States. They had to go to England. Guess what? Safe harbors. But in between there was the Atlantic Ocean. We had an entire war called the War of the Atlantic, because that space between those 2 safe havens was scary space. That's the internet today. That's the world. So this is not new. It's just we're now starting to think about it that way, right? But we've been fighting wars based on the premise of the data packet or the ship or the blood molecule or the white blood cell has to get from point A to point B in such a way that it's there safe, secure, and able to do something on the other end, right? It's always been about the data. But if you look at how people buy for security, how they do risk allocation and how they purchase things for security, it's always about my firewall, my switch, my VPN. That's why they keep failing. That's why they keep getting hit, hammered, and it's not going to change. Now, the smart organizations are doing something around identity-based, software-defined, encrypted microsegmentation. So like I told you, and I promised you, this is not a pipe dream. Organizations have been doing this and using this capability, this approach, if you will, this lens towards the design, implementation, and presentation of an architecture array since 2005. They've been doing it since 2005. There are capabilities out there right now, one of which is Stealth, that In fact, stealth is probably, in my honest opinion, it's why I work for Unisys, probably the best way to do this. So don't take my word for it. If you look at what Gartner says about microsegmentation, Gartner says there's 4 ways for an organization to do microsegmentation, right? One way is you're a Cisco house, you've bought all the Cisco stuff, you buy the Cisco solution, which is ACI. Guess what? You're vendor locked in, and now you've got to be spending a lot of money on Cisco infrastructure. That's great for Cisco, right? Not good for the business, the small business, the medium business. And unless you're like a huge multinational global conglomerate, you just don't have the money to go all in on all Cisco. Very expensive. And it's very complex to actually realize, and it takes a lot of time. If you're a cloud native and all you're doing is up in the cloud, VMware does something really nice with the hypervisor kind of microsegmentation. But guess what? You can't go anywhere with it, just like with Cisco. In a data center, it's nice, but what about the remote worker when you have to come out of the data center and that data is in flight? Cisco ACI breaks down, right? The other way is like this hodgepodge of a hybrid model where you got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, guess what? Now you're inducing complexity. And in my old job, I loved it when organizations were complex because they couldn't manage, and we would always find ways through the complexity because they were just too busy managing, not securing. What Gartner talks about is the sweet spot, the overlay model, where we don't care what your organization looks like. We don't care. It's agnostic to operating system. It's agnostic to infrastructure. All we ask is, can you get a packet from point A to point B? If the answer is yes, you can deploy stealth technology. Gartner calls it the overlay model of microsegmentation. That's your sweet spot because it allows you to go into a Cisco house and say, you're using Cisco, there's a better way. It's called stealth. In fact, stealth works with Cisco. You're using a SIM that does all this other stuff, like for example, QRadar or something like that, or Splunk, and you need a way to feed all that. Hey, there's a better way. You can use stealth. Sets up a whole bunch of conversations. Oh, infrastructure? You mean you're using satellites to get between point A and point B? Not a problem. You're doing terrestrial landlines, you're using GSM, you're using, basically, if it's a TCP IP packet, you can do it. And then someone will always say to me, Jack, what about, okay, that's good for IT, but what about OT, operational technology? Things that don't talk TCP IP, which by the way, for the non-security professionals out there, 99% of the attack vectors out there are based on TCP IP tools, right? Most of the world, however, runs on operational technology, all those non-TCP IP things, all those dumb devices, the plumbing, basically the energy grid, the water sector, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, that's coming under attack now too, because tools are being designed for that. Well, if you have a purely TCP IP based security model, how do you cover that gray area, right? Stealth can do that as well because that's a big market for us, right? So we have a broker that will actually sit between there. So when we talk TCP IP to non-TCP IP based infrastructure, there's a broker in the middle that gets you all that benefit, right? Now, that sounds great, but what is it? What is this thing stealth that Jack keeps talking about is? So before we jump into the video, I want to kind of tell you about what stealth actually is. So think about it like this. Stealth is nothing more than a hypersecure tunnel between 2 endpoints. That's all it is, right? It's a software-based security solution. So when someone says, what does it mean when I buy stealth? What does that look like? What you're buying is an agent. That's it, a lightweight agent. That agent works in conjunction with 2 other virtual entities, an enterprise management server and an authentication server. They can be hosted on-prem or in the cloud, preferably on-prem because of security concerns, but they can be hosted anywhere, right? So the agent works in conjunction with those 2 other pieces of virtual software, and that right there is the stealth family. They work in conjunction with whatever identity management system an organization using. So if you're using Active Directory to do your roles and provisioning, if you're using LDAP, or if you're like the government, you're using like a CAC card, or basically any recognized credentialing or authorization kind of thing, Stealth works with that. It draws those out. And then once the agent is on the network or on the device, that or attached to an identity, so when Jack has it on his identity, what that allows me to do is immediately from anywhere in the world log in, and I have a hyper secure tunnel between me and whatever application I'm trying to use. But here's what makes it different than a firewall or a VPN. Traditional firewalls and VPNs cannot scale at the level that Stealth does, because Stealth does it, one, virtually, software based, quietly, and it's automated, which means There's no access control listing and updating firewall rule sets, or in a VPN having to load balance a VPN. It is a single point hypersecure, basically taking a flat network into a mesh network instantaneously. You cannot do that with traditional VPNs. You cannot do that with conventional firewalls. And anybody that tells you they can is lying to you, because they want to bring in their team to sit there and do the engineering that will take 2 years to get you to that and only get you the 70% solution, whereas Stealth can do it out of the box overnight, literally within probably a week, right? That's how easy this is. It was actually designed for the US government specifically to do that, because the government looked around back in the early 2000s and said, the traditional solutions don't work. We need a way to have enterprise level kind of stuff based on identity, software-defined perimeters, to take advantage of the cloud, to kind of have all this, but we cannot take penalties in terms of cost, complexity, and management. We just can't. There's got to be a way to do that. So that's what Stealth was designed to solve. And so currently, Stealth is protecting, pause here for a minute, do a little deep packet inspection before I say too much. Stealth is actually protecting some of the most critical pieces, most sensitive pieces of data on the face of the earth. It is enabling things within the Department of Defense. It is enabling things within the financial sector. And when I say the financial sector, I'm not talking about a small bank. Yes, small banks, but also the very underpinnings of the US Federal Reserve, right? As well as everything from public sector and small, medium business, large business, enterprise, right? Because it's just that much cheaper. Because think about it, you're not buying hardware. And by the way, once you buy the agent, you can do a lot of things with that agent. There's no need to buy more things or more agents to do the thing that one agent, it's like Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. So you get, with that agent, with Stealth, you get visibility, not asset inventory stuff. I'm not talking about what's on the network. That's easy math. I'm talking about graduate level calculus stuff. What's talking to what, the telemetry. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're taking all of that previously unconstrained, unknown, untrusted, loose TCP and UDP traffic and chatter inside of a network, which, by the way, bomb blast that out now worldwide, because now you're talking about remote workers. But now you're having a conversation around visibility, what's talking to what, locking them down. So now you're getting control, precision, and then more importantly, another nice benefit of Stealth is cloaking, which means once it's been locked down with a stealth agent or two stealth agents, it disappears. Now, I don't use that word, I use it tongue in cheek. What I really mean by disappear is cloaking, right? What it does is, the way our proprietary technology works is, when a TCP IP tunnel is stood up, it doesn't respond to any unwanted, unknown, unauthorized requests. So all of that chatter actually starts dying down on the network. Your network starts to actually get a lot quieter, i.e. more control. But more importantly, like bullet time in the Matrix, when unknown, unauthorized devices start firing off going, hey, this is me trying to set up a tunnel or a connection between 2 points. If you're not allowed to talk to me, it's moving out of the way like Neo in the bullet time in the Matrix, and it drops the packets. So guess what that does? Let's go back to the beginning of the conversation. That sets up a really nice conversation about basic enumeration and scanning, ransomware. Remember what I talked about with ransomware? I don't care about the weapon, the weaponized payload. I care about the delivery mechanism. Most of the exploits now are done because adversaries are remotely and automatedly, I just made up a word, in an automated fashion, are now basically scanning IP ranges and network ranges and segments of a network to find vulnerable devices. And when they find it, this is all automated. Then, and only then, is the payload delivered. Well, what if you had a way that when they were scanning, nothing was coming back? So it basically is dark. So if you've ever done this before, as an adversary, when I'm trying to get into a network, I always land somewhere, usually not where I want to, but I have to figure out 2 questions. Who am I on the network, and where am I on the network, right? Because without that, I can't pivot around. I can't move around. Well, what happens if you're now stealth enabled? One, you can't look around. There's nothing to see. You're cloaked. Number 2, you're now starting to do things out of the norm, which sets you up for the SOCs and SIMs to catch you. And more importantly, you're now isolated in remember I said mesh network, you're in an isolated micro-segmented tunnel. So guess what? Now, at machine speed, you can have conversations around dynamic isolation and quarantining. That you can't do that the old way, right? So that's why this thing is very powerful. Now, I would love to keep talking about this more, right? We only have so much time. I want to make sure we have time for some comments and questions at the end, and I also want to get into this video. So pretty much in a nutshell, the big takeaway is this. If you remember nothing else from this talk, one, old models are not working. Just look in the news. Number two, hardware-based, perimeter-based, static-based security conversations, that is just not working, right? You have an opportunity now to move into this new world and actually embrace, not be fearful of, but embrace and take advantage of the remote workforce to set up all these other conversations. And you can do it in a way without having a customer or client rip and replace everything else just to put another tool in. You're talking about a way to come in very tactically, overlay on top of what they currently have. And actually, what's nice about Stealth is you can come in and deploy 2 Stealth agents on 2 endpoints immediately, show value add. And when they see that they can't see it, they can't attack it, and what it can bring to the large organization, they can then start gradually scaling out, buying more Stealth, very lightweight agents, deploying that across the network to the point where now, at the end state, they're on a zero trust journey. They're really having a conversation around data in flight. They're able to actually take advantage of a digital transformation and utilize the cloud securely. And they've extended the operational reach and access of their remote workforce while they're saving money, increasing security, reducing complexity, reducing costs, and reducing time. So when you say it like that, it's kind of mind-boggling that they wouldn't want to do that. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? So with that said, I'm going to shut up now for a minute. I am now going to, this is the tricky part. I talked all that technology, and now I'm actually going to try and show you a video. And if I can seamlessly do this, so let me do this real quick. So Tom, are you still listening, and can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. So I'm going to click the video on, and just tell me if you can see the video so I know that it's working, okay?
Sure.
So what are you seeing now? You seeing the video playing?
I'm seeing it playing. Yep.
Great. Perfect. All right. So what you're seeing here, folks, is actually Stealth working. This is actually deployed. And it's not live. We've actually recorded this. So Lisette and the team have actually recorded this. But what you're seeing is when we do this with a customer, it's actually live. It's actually on their network or on a network that's utilizing, for example, a cloud like AWS or Azure. So what you're seeing is a traditional connection that's occurring here on the screen. Okay. And you're going to see the contrast between a stealth enabled connection and a non-stealth enabled connection. Now, what you're actually looking at is the actual UIX for Stealth. So this is what a client or customer would see if one of our pre-sales solution architects were actually sitting there. So a bunch of ways that we can do this. We can take a PCAP file from a client and customer and do this. We can actually deploy a Stealth agent called Stealth Aware onto their network to do this. Or we can simply show them this demo live and actually scan and enumerate live. And so right now, unable to connect, right? Problem loading the page. So what you're actually seeing in real time here is the stealth enabled apps. And on my screen, it's covered because I've got some system controls and stuff over here. But you should see on the right-hand side of your screen the actual data paths between stealth apps and stealth non-enabled apps and stuff. So you're going to see the cloaking in action. You're going to see the ability of Stealth to securely connect to stealth-enabled and authorized to talk to each other endpoints. And you're going to see the result of a scan when Stealth agents are on or enabled, as well as disabled. So I'm going to pause there for a minute. And again, this was all done live. So now here's the client workstation. And now we're going to try and fire it up again. Okay, so there it is. And so there it is, ping. Now, do you see what's happening? That was actually kind of quick, but you see how the ping came back and we have a green on the right-hand side?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's Stealth client to Stealth app. Life is good, as we say. Now, what's not being said over this video is the actual fact that this network that you're looking at, no one else can see this network. So imagine this being a VPN connection. Imagine this being RDP session, right? Adversaries can't see this conversation, right? Now look what happens. Again, Apologies for the very brevity of that. Normally this video takes about 5 minutes and it goes into a little preamble in the beginning to kind of preempt it. But the point of the video is not so much, and let me pause it there for a minute and let me get you back to me. So now, Tom, you should just be seeing me, right?
Correct.
Yeah, great. So the takeaway from that video, and again, very short, but it's not so much the how it works. We would very much rather sit down and actually walk you through the mechanisms behind that. I just wanted to show you that this actually exists. It actually exists. It works. This is ready to go today out of the box, right? And folks are actually using it. And this demo, the demo is there for you. So with that, Tom, I am going to now shut up. Happy to take any comments or questions in the time we have remaining. I know we're down to about 15 minutes. Happy to talk more, but again, thanks to everyone for dialing in to listen, and Tom and eSecurity for letting me join in. Over to you, Tom.
Yeah. Let me clarify. I wanted you to clarify a few things. So this product, Stealth, will work with virtually any operating system as well, and mobile devices and that sort of thing.
So Stealth was designed from the ground up. The answer is yes, but it's yes, but. And here's why the but comes into play. Stealth was designed to work with the primary, biggest bang for your buck, most used operating systems out there, right? So your Windows, your flavors of Linux, things like that. We will, on occasion, bump into an exquisitely purpose-built operating system, or even one that's no longer supported. So for example, someone might say, hey, I've got a Solaris data center or a Solaris operating system sitting on site. The first question I'm going to say to you is, why are you still using Solaris? It's not even supported anymore. That's a huge vulnerability. But most competitors would say, let me sell you something to replace that. Well, Unisys would say, let's not replace it, because if you've ever done this before, you have to realize that organizations spend a lot of time, money, and man and woman hour, FTEs, to tune and optimize a data center. Now, just because the operating system has gone out of business or is no longer supported, they don't want to get rid of it, because it's tied into the very network, right? It may not be on their roadmap to replace for a couple of years. And to be honest with you, if it's working, keep it working. But now you're stuck with this conversation around legacy system, operating system, right? So what we do with our clients is, and we do this with some of our Stealths, or with some of our Unisys stuff, as a matter of fact, we identify the non-standard operating system, in this case Solaris, we wrap it with Stealth, so that now that operating system is protected and it's now removed from the IT estate, basically the attack surface, if you will, right? So now it's removed from that. It's cryptographically segmented from the rest of the network, but it's still able to operate and extend out. What's also nice about that is you can extend the reach of some of these weird, no longer supported operating systems out to places. But to answer your question specifically, yes, the bigs, absolutely out of the box, ready to go. There are some that if the business model warrants it, we can write the scripting, we can modify the software to support that. But actually, the better way to do it is to cryptographically segment with Stealth and actually protect and endure the operating system, because now you're saving the customer money while you're selling them Stealth. It's like a twofer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you mentioned various size companies that your product can work with or is being used by. We're experiencing COVID right now. Everything is upside down. People are re-examining their budgets and everything else. But what is going to be, in your mind, first of all, what size companies realistically will adopt your solution, or should adopt it, or likely to make that decision? And what are going to be their primary motivators right now, or even in 3 months if you want to take a different time frame?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we're seeing right now, the metrics we're seeing right now, and I hate to say it like this, it's people that have been compromised or feel that they've been compromised. So that's point one. So if they've been hit with a ransomware attack recently and basically have been, the current strategy has been proven invalid, right? They're looking for something new to fix that problem. And the point is, they're already going to lose money because of ransomware, because of downtime, remediation, loss of business stuff, and then potentially ransomware, right? So they've already lost money. So you can't then go into them and say, now buy all this other stuff. No, you can't do it. You want to be able to go in and say, that would be great if you had all the money in the world to go rip out all your stuff and buy new stuff. But what if I could come in right now while you're under attack and just start pushing stealth agents out and start removing your IT estate off of the playing field? they would be like, yeah, I need that right now. I'm bleeding right now. Help me stop the bleeding. That's the conversation. So that's the big win right now. I just hate to say it like that because it's predatory in
Yeah.
nature. That's it. The second one that we see is if you catch a new CIO or a new CISO or somebody who's joining and they're taking that first look at what they've inherited and they're going, this may not be, my predecessor built a model based on a 3 to 5 year plan pre-COVID. Well, we're in a different world now. I need to figure out a way going forward. That's a great place to catch them in that roadmap. That's another good place.
Okay. And in terms of company size, is there any reason why a particular size company, are companies too small to adopt your product line, or is it more about price? Is it more about effort, or how would you define that?
So the answer is we're all over the map. And from a Unisys perspective, obviously the way our business model works is we make more money based on more agents sold. So it's in our best interest to sell more stealth agents. So the more licenses, the more devices you have, the more identities you want to protect, the more servers you want to protect. Obviously, that is great for Unisys. But what that allows us to do is the bigger the company, the better the conversation is in terms of efficiencies, right? It allows us to move around a little bit in terms of, pricing, as well as when do you want to deploy them, right? Because some people say, I want to buy stealth, but I'd like to take a small bite first. So it's the consumption model. Let me bite a little bit of stealth. And as I start to better understand my IT estate, I will deploy stealth agents on them. So now it's a land and expand. That's great. But then that being said, Tom, we've also had some people that say, Jack, I've got 100 people. I've got, 100 devices. I need 100 licenses. And we say, great, here it is. It's right out of the box. That's relatively steady. It's really, that's a turn and burn right there. So
Okay.
the other
Okay,
thing
that
that
makes
the other thing that comes play in though, then this is a key thing for the folks out there that are trying to sell this stuff or buy this stuff. The bigger the organization, the more complex it's going to, now we have to start getting into what's talking to what does, because everyone says this is what my network looks like. Most people, they're about 60% solution. We get in there and start looking, we're going to show you what your network really looks like. That's a different conversation.
Okay, so let me open it up to the viewers here and see if anybody wants to ask any questions. If you can raise your hand, I'll open up your mic, assuming you have a mic. Michael Heron, let's see, I don't know if you have a microphone, but your hand is up, so let's see if there's something you do. Or you can type in the question box. We have two ways. Okay. And then let's see, I tried opening up his mic. I can open up everybody's mic if anybody wants to jump in. All right, I'm going to open up everybody's mic. We'll just see what happens here. Hopefully, anarchy will not reign. Is that working? Says all.
By the way, what Tom's doing right now is the equivalent of what every company did in COVID with their VPN. I can't control the individual conversation, so I am literally going to turn on all of the mics at the same time. This is, hey, that's Tom, you couldn't have done it better than me. That was perfect.
I tell you, but I'm failing. So I guess maybe I really am working, doing what you said. But I'm trying to unmute everybody, and now I'm seeing it. So in terms of proceeding, if anybody's interested in working with you, obviously eSecurity would be more than happy to follow up with anybody here and see if there's something that we can do together. We'll work together with Unisys to make sure that they have the opportunity to learn more, potentially whatever process is available to get more deeply involved in to see what the results would be and how much it would cost, because price is always an issue as well. And then, of course, eSecurity wants to be heavily or can be involved in helping to enable the technology and solutions for the customers as well. So we have a managed service organization to do that. So,
Tom, if I
yep.
made you presenter, would you have controls back to open up everyone's mics?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Let me try it. I'll switch back. I'm doing it right here. And let me see if that has any value. I tell you this whole unmute themselves. Okay. Oh yeah, they have to unmute themselves. That's the thing. It's enabled. Others, one person did enable it, and then they're no longer doing it. So I'm not sure we're going to get any questions from anybody else. But look, I will say that I think your presentation was amazing, and I think it opens up people's minds, which is, it's kind of like going to an industry conference. There's another way to look at where we have to go and as we move forward. The way I look at it, it's similar to this slide here, right? There's STPs and zero trust. Zero trust is one of those things we need to be looking at and figuring out how we can adopt that going forward. And a software-defined perimeter. Cloud application security is another area where we're not finding companies getting serious about securing their cloud applications. So there's a number of areas where I think companies need to open up their minds and understand that the threats are changing, and almost all of these new threats have been enabled by the cloud. Everything moving out of the office is causing the issues, and of course, people now moving out of the office is like you said, it's like we had a week to deal with this, and now we have to catch up. We're here to help the customers do that, and so if they're
so Tom, let me pause you there for a minute because that's a great point you bring up.
We got one person, Esteban. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. Hey, Jack, great discussion. I appreciate it, and it's always great insight. So I think a big question, right, as you go through, and I know you've been preaching zero trust for a while. If we were to go into a CISO CIO and his discussion or his comment is, hey, I want to move to zero trust, and SDPs is where he wants to go, what would be your first recommendation?
Yeah, so Esteban, that's the $1 million question, right, brother? So if it was me, first thing I would say is define for me what you mean by zero trust. And the problem is zero trust it means many things to different people, and it's all about risk appetite. Zero trust actually started in the DoD when we came up with when we weaponized the internet, and then we started kind of figuring out we needed to have these trust zones because everything between places was going to be dangerous. And then John Kinderberg, who's a friend of mine, when he was at Forrester, he started kind of evangelizing zero trust and zero trust networking, right? But then when Palo Alto I shouldn't say it like that. When Palo Alto hired John away from Forrester, now John's zero trust mantra sounds very similar to a Palo Alto firewall conversation, right? And then you've got Gartner talking about zero trust like things, and you've got Forrester now trying to own the zero trust model. The point is, zero trust is all over the map, and organizations and CISOs are looking for a Gartner-like magic quadrant that says, if you want zero trust, here's what here's how it's defined, and here are the #1 ways to do it. Well, we're not there right now because no one can grab it right now and define it. And zero trust will mean different things to a small organization versus a healthcare organization versus, so it's different across verticals because financial sector has different, they have different controls. They have different compliance rules, regulations, and audits that they got to go through in order to have data conversations, right? So their zero trust definition is different than, say, somebody that's just in supply chain, right? But if you're a supply chain that's providing parts to the United States government, but your factories are in China, now you've got different streams that they can't mix, right? So that zero trust is different. So that's the point. I would lean back and go, all right, CISO, define for me how your organization, your particular vertical, what do you mean by zero trust? And then from there, I start unpacking it to actually get to what they really want. And really, most of the time, what they really want, it's relatively easy to achieve, right? It's when you start scaling it that what we're trying to do is keep the complexity off of that, the penalty of cost, the penalty of management off of that, right? That's where the ugliness gets in. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes perfect sense. Thanks.
Cool.
Okay, so in the interest of being timely, we're about slightly less than an hour here, but we're inching up in the hour. I appreciate everybody's attendance. Thank you very much. Our sales associates here will follow up with you to see if there's any interest in having a discussion on this or anything else that we can help you with. Appreciate your time today and survive the COVID, and thank you very much for attending.